let's move to our next topic and talk about the SEC West as a whole. So we firmly established Alabama number one, and then a pretty big gap, I would say.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you, to me, the most interesting question about the SEC West. Who's the second best team in this division and why?
To me, I think it's fairly clear. I think it's Arkansas.
Dang it, you stole my pick.
And Hampton, I'm sorry. I had a feeling you were the same wavelength. I had a feeling that we would both say that. I mean, you're looking at a team that they returned almost everyone from last year. They lost Traylon Burks in the first round as a wide receiver. And you know what they did? They replaced him with a 5-star transfer from Oklahoma, Jaden Hazelwood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried at all about Traylon Burks leaving Arkansas. You got another year for KJ Jefferson, who is a almost elite runner of the football, a very good runner of the football from the quarterback position. Was hit or miss at throwing at QB, but I think with having guys like Hazelwood, returning Kendall Briles, which was huge, Barry Odom on defense, both their coordinators. I think this is what we're talking about, how it just makes such a huge difference to know what you're going to do next year, and the game plan doesn't change. The scheme doesn't change, and how important that is. Arkansas has been a dog in the fight, and they're just looking for people to kill. And up until that Georgia game last year, they were doing it. They were taking care of business, and then Georgia kind of was able to match them and exceed them at their own game of, we're going to come right at you, stop us if you can. And Georgia had the dogs to stop them last year.
Mm-hmm.
I only see one team in the SEC West that can do that this year. That's Alabama. Besides that, I don't know a defense that will be able to match up man for man with that Arkansas offense.
Wow.
And in the trenches, outside, I like Arkansas second best. I think that a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, Graham's disrespecting A&M. He's not respecting Lane Kiffin." I think you look at it, A&M is still 2 years away, from my opinion. They had a great recruiting class. They have several returners from last year, but I just don't see this being the year that A&M drives up and takes Alabama. Not just beats Alabama, but is the best team in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss, you lost Matt Corral, who was your best quarterback you've had since, arguably since Eli Manning at Ole Miss.
Hey, put some respect on Bo Wallace's name.
Bo Wallace.
I'm totally kidding.
And I think that Arkansas is the team of the West. The floor of the SEC West is really high, because I don't know if you can look at any of those teams and say, I don't know who doesn't make a bowl game this year. You've got Mississippi State, who is kind of not really the question mark, but a question mark of what's Mike Leach going to do. But Hampton, me and you both like Will Rogers.
Love Will Rogers. Yeah,
it just seems like the more games that Mississippi State plays, the better direction they are, and the more they figure out that Mike Leach system. And then LSU, with Brian Kelly taking over, you can't count them out. I think everybody's kind of doing that. I think everybody's saying LSU doesn't have a chance. They still got some dogs. They got Jay Daniels from Arizona State playing QB. I don't think that LSU is going to be one of those teams that you can just instantly check the W column. Like, you might be able to.
No.
I don't expect this to be LSU's year of 10-2, but I don't necessarily see LSU getting devoured by any team in the SEC West outside of Arkansas and maybe Alabama. Hampton, I'll get your input on it. But last thing I'll say, just that I forgot about, is Ole Miss. They're having troubles figuring out who their QB is going to be. Jackson Dart came in from USC, and it just seems like a question mark. He's a question mark. It was supposed to be his job to lose, and he's kind of losing it. So, and we hadn't even talked about Auburn, but I mean, we all know what Auburn. So, Hampton, go ahead and trash the Tigers, Eagles, the Plains, whatever you want to say. But I don't know your second best team in the West. I know you kind of agree with Arkansas, but who's somebody else that might be going under the radar?
Well, I'll start with Arkansas as they were my original pick. And I think the biggest thing and the biggest discourse in the SEC this offseason, like preview magazine, magazines come out, and we have our top 5 quarterback list. And for the people in the media that did not put KJ Jefferson in their top 5, and they put a guy like Spencer Rattler, or even I love Will Levis. I really do. I think he's great. Me and you and I were on him last year, as I said earlier in the pod. KJ Jefferson is a better player at this point than Will Levis. He's proved more on the field, in my opinion, as a runner and as a passer. Now, is he inconsistent as a passer? Absolutely. But I think he can improve upon that, and I think he will. And with all their returning experience, I know their offensive line is going to be good. Sam Pittman knows how to coach and develop O-line. Not worried about that. Receiver, you mentioned it. Jaden Hazelwood coming in from Oklahoma. High-profile guy who, as another dimension of that offense, is going to kind of replace Traylon Burks. They got a tight end I've heard that's making a lot of noise in camp. They've got a freshman named Isaiah. Last name starts with S. I don't want to butcher it. But apparently he's been making plays. And so I feel really good about their offense. Kendall Browse comes back, continuity on staff. Then they're going to be really explosive. I mean, I don't think people realize KJ Jefferson last year had 3,340 yards and 27 touchdowns. I mean, that's big-time numbers in the SEC for a first-time starting quarterback. So I think now transition to the defensive side of the ball with them. They got Bumper Pool coming back. They got Catalan coming back. And I think they got, using the transfer portal like they did for Hazelwood, they got Drew Sanders from Alabama, who's a dang good football player, who's going to be playing that outside linebacker position, going to add a pass rush element to their defense that they probably didn't have last year, well, that I know they didn't have last year. And I think they're going to be able to utilize him in a lot of ways because I read a thing that in their scrimmage this past weekend, they even used him at inside linebacker a little bit, which I think is really interesting. And I think they're going to get creative with that. And that'll be a fun, chess piece on the chessboard that Barry Odom could utilize. My one worry with them, it seems to be kind of a theme, and I'm going to be interested if there's anything they do from a schematic approach this year to kind of change this perception. They always start out really good defensively, and then everybody kind of figures out that they're just going to drop 8 in coverage and just rush 3. And then people can kind of pick them apart, and their defense kind of falls off by the end of the year. I'm wondering if that changes this year, because if that doesn't change, my opinion of them varies a little bit because their ceiling kind of lowers for me.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to kind of see if Odom makes any adjustments with that. And then their schedule sets up pretty good. Start out with Cincinnati, then go to South Carolina. They got that, or they have South Carolina at home, which I think we hadn't talked about the East, but I think South Carolina is going to be a sneaky team. They have an easy game. And then their main stretch in the year is at A&M, then they host Alabama, then at Mississippi State, at BYU, bye week Auburn, and then they end the year with LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri. And, I mean, that's a tough schedule. I don't think that's a murderer's row by any stretch of imagination. Now, those first 2 games, they got to come out ready to play because I know Cincinnati lost a lot, but, I trust Luke Fickell to have them ready. He always has a pretty good team there, very good coach. I respect him a lot. But I think they're going to come out the gate firing, and I think they're going to be A&M week 4. And that Alabama game, hosting them after A&M and before Alabama hosts A&M the following week, Alabama better be very careful going into Fayetteville that weekend. So I'm very high on Arkansas too, but go ahead. What you got?
I was just going to, piggyback on your comment about their schedule. I mean, you look at it; they're playing the big dogs at home, and you say, well, their biggest road game is against Texas A&M. That's in Dallas. That's
Neutral.
Jerry
Yeah.
World. That's at AT&T. That's not even really an away game from
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas. And so the schedule lines up really well to knock off some of these big teams, to have Ole Miss come to town, to have LSU come to town, to have Alabama come to town. That changes the game completely, because
Mm-hmm.
the Arkansas fan base has been rejuvenated from years of mediocrity, and Sam Pittman has brought them back where they have pride. And so you're going to
Mm-hmm.
see AT&T Stadium packed. You're going to see um, Arkansas's home games excited, loud,
Yeah.
ready to go. And we talk about that a lot. Like, that makes a huge difference, but it does.
Home field advantage matters. Yeah.
When you're playing in front of 100,000 of guys that are for me, that's hard to beat. That is really
Mm-hmm.
hard to beat. And so the schedule lines up a whole lot in Arkansas's favor, for sure.
Yeah.
The biggest away game, they play at Mississippi State, at Auburn, you know,
And at BYU.
yeah, and at BYU and at Mizzou. None of those guys are really scary. I mean, you could
Mm-hmm.
be playing all of those teams not in the top 25, and all the
Yeah.
top 25 opponents you're playing, they're coming to my house.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll speak big to Arkansas, and just their level of success this year.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Graham. And I'm going to run down a couple teams really quick before we kind of get in our sleeper pick, who
Yeah.
I think is going to, like, a team that we believe will be better than the media and kind of the national narrative is projecting. Um, I know A&M is a lot of people's second best in the West, rhyming accidentally. So I don't agree with that. And the reason I don't, I thought, last year was kind of the year that with the defense that they had a very experienced defense. They had a very good offensive line, or I thought for the most part they did. I thought that was going to be the year. Then quarterback had issues with that, which I know they announced. Haynes King was the starter going into last year, but I was not impressed in the limited snaps he had in the first game against. It was a no-name team. I think he threw 3 picks, and then before he got hurt versus Colorado, I don't think he played very well either. So coming into this year, they're having to replace Kenyon Green, who was a first-round pick, really good player on the O-line. Their left tackle, got to replace him. Their interior of the line is pretty set with. They've got let me pull up his name real quick. I think Foster, Bryce Foster, returning at center. They've got Anais Smith, at running back, slash slot. Devin A. Chain as a running back, receiver type guy. They lost Isaiah Spiller, who I thought was a great player for them last year, and they got Evan Stewart at receiver, who is a true freshman coming in, very highly touted, very well thought of, and he's apparently making a lot of plays. Behind him, I don't love their receiver room, which granted, I'm not as well versed in the A&M receiver room as I am in Alabama. But last year, I don't think I was very impressed with what they had there as well, especially considering a couple of them, I think, got kicked off the team or transferred elsewhere. But the big question with them is the quarterback. You got Haynes King, Connor Wiegman, true freshman, and Max Johnson, transfer from LSU, competing. And this may be on purpose, but I Google searched, I looked at on 3 message boards. There's like no buzz on anybody. Like, I don't know who's leading that competition. And the crazy thing is, it's kind of hard to forecast and project them without knowing that, because all 3 quarterbacks are vastly different. Haynes King is more of a dual threat. Max Johnson is more of a steady, accurate type quarterback who has a little bit of moxie. I like Max Johnson. I don't think he's elite. solid college quarterback, and then Connor Weigman, big arm, a lot of upside. And so I think their offense is going to look. I mean, they'll have a lot of the same core principles, but it'll be different depending on who the quarterback is. So kind of hard to project on that front. And then defensively, like you said, I think next year and the year after that, with the recruiting class they just had, that's going to be the year that really shows those recruiting efforts, aka money, playing big dividends with that defensive line class they had. Um, so I think A&M is going to be solid.
Mhm.
I'm thinking 8-4, 8-4, 9-3, but I still prefer Arkansas to them.
Yeah.
And
You
I'm
you know what
gonna
Arkansas's identity is going to be, and
exactly.
like you said, without knowing the quarterback at A&M, we don't know what their identity is going to be. Is it going to be run first? Is it going to be pass heavy? Going to be play action based?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Jimbo system still will reign supreme. But you
Mm-hmm.
look at all those quarterbacks; they are vastly different. And I think their leading receiver last year might have been Jalen Weidermeyer. At tight end,
Yeah, who?
that's a
Oh,
big loss. It was
mm-hmm.
their biggest weapons out of the out of the backfield was Isaiah Spiller and Weidermeyer. Besides that, you didn't really have to know any of the A&M wide receiver names because they didn't. They might have had one game that was substantial, and the rest of them was just on to the next one. So I think Hampton, like you said, that quarterback position, not knowing what their identity is going to be, is huge. Whereas you know what Arkansas
Mm-hmm.
is going to be from day one.
Well, and how did they beat Alabama? By hitting passes to the running back out of the backfield on wheel routes and swing routes and hitting the tight end up the seam
Yeah.
and taking advantage of that matchup. So it wasn't the wide receivers on the outside to kind of add to your point.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing that I'll say before we kind of move on to sleeper, like our sleeper team, I think the biggest question mark, the team that I could say they could go 7-5 or they could go 10-2, 9-3 is LSU.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Jay Daniels, while I don't think the production at Arizona State was anything to write home about I thought he showed traits that you could see kind of translate to the next level. Good arm, a little bit of moxie, kind of like I described Max Johnson, athletic, live arm, but I don't think he ever showed I'm a top 5, top 10 quarterback in college football. But it looks like he's going to win the job because Miles Brennan quit football, which is a crazy
He retired. Hampton.
situation.
He
He
retired.
retired. Yeah, which is I don't want to speak on that because I don't know all the details, but that was a very odd
Well,
situation and odd news to come out of Baton Rouge.
Well, it was really important when he said that he was going to stay in LSU, because then it was
Yeah.
Brian Kelly got there. It was like, well, who's going to be the quarterback if Max Johnson's gone and Miles Brennan's in the transfer portal? We have nobody, and so now it's a 2-man race from what I've seen with Jaden Daniels and Nussmeyer. Is
Yep.
that that freshman?
Garrett.
Yeah, Garrett Nussmeyer. He might be sophomore, freshman,
Mm-hmm.
early
Yeah.
upperclassman. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was such a big question mark and now to see that he's retiring, it just kind of leaves you just confused.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Daniels will be good. I think Brian Kelly's a really good coach.
Mhm.
His track record at Notre Dame speaks for itself. Um, and they've got weapons. They got John Emery, running back, who apparently is having a really good fall camp. They've got Keyshawn Butte at receiver, all world, probably best receiver in the SEC when healthy. I think he's a really dynamic player. Brian Thomas Jr. apparently is going to be kind of the second guy in line behind him. He's like 6'4", 200, can really run, has a lot of upside. So you got those two guys. I think their biggest question is O-line. I don't know how I don't think they've recruited as well there as they have in the past. And I think that was kind of their main problem the
Mhm.
past 2 years. So I'll be interested to see kind of how that sorts out. But defensively, they feel really good about their cornerbacks. I'm not going to try to pronounce many of their names because I don't know how. But Harold, no, it's not Harold Perkins. What's his name? I got it written down here. Um, I think it is Harold Perkins. I think um, he's a freshman linebacker that apparently they're very impressed with, who might get a lot of playing time. You got BJ Ojolari coming off the edge. Mason Smith is a second-year player, second-year defensive lineman who's a freak, and he's drawing rave reviews. So I think they've got some talent on that side of the ball. I mean, Orgeron, for all his faults, still recruited pretty well.
Mhm.
And I think they're going to have talent to work with. They're just they're kind of an unknown. I could see them
Yeah.
being a decent team, and being really strong. A lot of it depends on quarterback play, and kind of how their schedule shakes out. So, with that, Graham, let's move on to our sleeper pick. What team in the West do you think is going to be a little better than people are thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about LSU a lot, and I like them as a sleeper mainly because you don't know what you're getting. But a team that I think is a sleeper is Mississippi State, and the reason why Mike
Screw
Leach.
you, dude.
Have,
We're connected.
I'm telling you, Mike Leach is used to playing those 10 o'clock Saturday night games at Wazoo, where the only people that are watching it are getting ready to go to sleep or they're intoxicated. I mean, that's it. People don't tune in to Washington State games to see the outcome. And then what happens? Washington State beats Oregon State 150 to 135.
Mm-hmm.
So he's used to sliding under the radar and winning these close games. I like Will Rogers, Hampton. I think that he is as good as this offense will be. If he is elite, this offense can be elite. If he is average, this team is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Just to me, I think Mississippi State's one of those. It's just the opposite of Arkansas State in the fact that opposite in the fact they're going to throw the ball every single play until they can't, and then they'll run it once and then throw it 50 more times.
Mm-hmm.
But they are similar to Arkansas in the fact that you know what you're getting. You're getting the crossing routes with 5 wides, and we're going to make you run with us. And if you can keep up, good luck. If you can't, too bad, so sad. You're just going to be left in the dust. And so I think that having another year of experience under his belt, I think Mississippi State not going to win the SEC West. But I could see them beating LSU, being better than Auburn, maybe even taking out Ole Miss if that quarterback situation doesn't get figured out, just for this year. So, Hampton, I'm sorry I keep stealing your picks. Maybe I should let you go first once.
Well, that just means we're on the same page, dude. I mean, that's not a bad problem to have. I just was like, no way he's going to pick Mississippi State, and then of course you do. But I'm with
After
you.
all we talked about on LSU, just saying like, man, LSU seems like a good sleeper pick.
Yeah.
And
then you did the old fakeroo on me, but I'm with you. And Will Rogers, we were a Will Rogers pod last year too. I don't think what he did from the middle of the year to all the way to the back half was talked about enough. He went on an insane tear, and he ended up with I think 4,300 yards and like 30 or 40 touchdowns. I mean, had one of the best passing seasons in SEC history,
and nobody knew about it.
And nobody knew about it. No, and I think obviously their offense is predicated on the pass. So Mike Leach has had a lot of quarterbacks do really well in that system. Gardner Minshew, Graham Harrell, the list goes on. But I think Will has really good touch. He's a player. I mean, he's a gamer, very tough kid. I think might have been Alabama where he was clearly injured a little bit, and he kept playing, kept fighting through it. And I think with another year under his belt, I think he's only a junior.
Yeah.
I mean, he started last year as a sophomore, played a little bit as a freshman, but I mean, for him to kind of come in and be that caliber of player that young, I think is really impressive. So you've got him kind of leading the offense. You've got two receivers, Wally is last name, and Austin Williams, who's a transfer. They're kind of going to pick up the slack. I think Michael Polk was their number one receiver last year. He went on to the NFL, so I think they're going to come in and supplement a lot of his production. And I think the key for them, two things. So one, they have 8 of their 11 starters back on defense. And their defense last year was 5th in yardage and 3rd against the run, which I think didn't get discussed enough.
No.
And you're returning all that experience, so I think their defense is going to improve. They got a couple really good quality linebackers that I like. I don't know their names. Sorry, folks. But they had good years last year. And the other thing that's going to be a big question mark that they kind of have to answer, their offensive line. They lost Charles Cross, who was a top 10 pick or top 15 pick. I think he went to Seattle. Mm-hmm. Really good player. Left tackle, one of the best in football. Him and Evan Neal, to me, were the 2 best last year. Him and the guy from NC State, Aquanu, who is now starting for the Panthers. So that evaluation was correct, it seems. And I think that is going to be a big question. If they can't solidify that spot, they're going to have a little bit more trouble. But the other thing that I'm a little concerned about, their schedule. Graham, you want me to read off the middle of their schedule?
Come on.
So they start – this is their first 3-game stretch. They have Memphis, who not great, but still a quality game to start off with.
They should have beat them last year if it wasn't for the ref.
Yeah.
So, they'll have to push some payback for that.
Yeah, they'll probably have revenge on their mind. So, but still a quality opponent. Then they go to Arizona, play them at 9 p.m.
Easy dub.
Week 2. Easy dub, but still
Arizona
Power 5 opponent.
Trash.
Yeah. Well, Graham feels very strongly about Arizona, folks.
Arizona
but then,
last year, they will continue.
I think I like it.
The only upside of Arizona, this is not a Pac-12 podcast by any means. I think they got Jaden DeLaura from Washington State. I believe that's where he was. And he's a solid quarterback. Besides that, Arizona's not good. Continue.
Okay. Thank you for the Arizona knowledge because I'm not very well versed. So go Wildcats. Next, we go to at LSU on a Saturday night. That's no easy game. Then a little bit of off week with Bowling Green. Then buckle your seatbelt, put your hair in a ponytail, and get ready to ride because then you have A&M at home. Then you have Arkansas at home. Then you go to Kentucky. Then you play Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Then you have a bye week. Then you have Auburn at home. Then Georgia at home, East Tennessee, and then you finish with Ole Miss. That is a murderer's row, bro.
Yeah.
Like, that is rough. I mean, like, I'm not one who's like, schedule month. Oh, it's tough. That is rough. Like, I think. Go ahead.
Week in and week out. Week in and week out, you got to be ready to go. Outside of the first 3 weeks, I mean, you're getting one arm chopped off just to fight with another.
Well, I mean, to me, they're a classic team. Their talent and their ability might not be reflected in their record because of how hard that schedule is. Mm-hmm. So, I definitely think they're a sleeper team. And before we go to our breakout players for the year, we're just going to give like one apiece and kind of try to get on out of here because we're running a little long. I want to talk about Ole Miss and Auburn. Ole Miss, you mentioned the quarterback situation, which I think is fascinating because everyone had penciled in Jackson Dart being the guy. Mm-hmm. Well, Luke Altmaier, who came in the bowl game, Sugar Bowl against Baylor, I thought he played well. I thought he showed a lot of resilience, a lot of maturity for, that being kind of his first significant game action. So I'm not too worried about who wins. I think Lane Kiffin has proven, no matter who the quarterback is, that he will be able to tailor an offense around them. They'll be able to put up points and generate yardage. So I'm not too worried about that. But it will be interesting because I do think like we've been talking about, the ceiling of their team may change a little bit depending on who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
The big thing with them is what's his name? Zach Evans, transfer from TCU. Now the kid's been a little bit of a problem off the field. A little, his recruitment was a circus, but there's no doubt about it. The kid is special.
Mm-hmm.
And the reports coming out of Oxford is that he has continued that and is going to probably be their feature player on offense. And what I equate it to, he's going to be their Amari Cooper at running back. Lane Kiffin, when he has a star player, he feeds him the ball. Even better, let me take back the Amari Cooper. Derrick Henry in 2015. He was Alabama's best player on offense. So what did Lane Kiffin do? Oh, I'm going to give him the ball 46 times against Auburn, and I'm going to give him the ball 45 times against Florida. That is the type of guy Lane Kiffin is. He gives the ball to his playmakers and schemes them open. And I think Zach Evans is going to be that guy for them. Receiver, I know they lost Braylon Sanders. They got a couple other guys that I think will be able to step up and be productive. And they've got the tight end from USC, Michael Trigg, who I think his name's Michael. It might be Michael or Dalton. I know his last name's Trigg. I think they're very high on him. The defense I'm a little worried about. They lost a lot last year, and I don't think by any means were they great on defense last year, but they lost that Sam Williams kid who had like 12 sacks, was a really effective player for them. So I'm a little worried about that. So I think their ceiling is a little lower than last year. Still think they're going to be a team that can sneak up and surprise some guys. And then finally, Auburn. It's been very interesting to follow their quarterback competition because apparently TJ Finley is winning that job and winning it handily. I've heard more about him and Robbie Ashford than I have Zach Calzada.
I've heard a lot about Robbie Ashford too.
Yeah, Ashford kind of making plays and scrambling around.
With his feet.
Yeah, with his feet. So I could see TJ being the starter and them carving out a role for Robbie. But I think the telltale with them, they've got Tank Bigsby at running back, elite back. Love the guy. I think he's really good. Jarquez Hunter behind him, who was really effective last year as a freshman. Apparently, there's another walk-on type back that they've got that they're really excited about. Defensively, Derek Hall's coming back. Owen Papo's coming back. Had to replace Smoke Monday, Roger McCreary. I think with DJ James, the Oregon transfer, and Jason Jones, the Oregon transfer on the defensive line, they maybe plug some holes there. I think they're lacking depth on defense. And I think their downfall is going to be their offensive line. I don't think Gus recruited well there. And I do not believe that Brian Harsin has recruited well there in his short time at Auburn. So I think that is going to ultimately be the downfall of their team. That and receiver, because there's a freshman named Camden Brown that apparently they're very high on, has been making plays all throughout fall camp. Then they've got Coy Moore, the LSU transfer, Malcolm Johnson, who is a junior this year. And a lot of those guys are very unproven. I'm not saying they're not going to be good, but I don't think they have any game breakers. So, Auburn could and, come out of nowhere and go 11-1 and go to a national championship. I just don't see it with this team, with the personnel that they have. And I think it's going to be very hard for them with the schedule they have to play to go 8-4, 9-3, and for Brian Harsin to earn a third year. So that's kind of what I think for those teams. And Graham, do you have any final thoughts? We'll kind of go ahead and wrap it up and talk about some breakout players maybe in the next pod that we do just for sake of time. But do you have any closing thoughts on Ole Miss and Auburn or SEC West as a whole? Do you have a bold take that you want to give to the audience?
Yeah, I think that Zach Evans, like you said, that offense is going to run through him. I see Lane Kiffin not changing the offense, but trying to put the ball in his hands as much as he can.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't know who's playing quarterback, get it out of his hand quick and let playmakers make plays. And then with Auburn, I mean, I don't know if they had one thing go right this offseason we've obviously heard about the scandals, but you lost your OC and your DC in not good ways. And it's not that Mike Bobo or Derek Mason wouldn't take better jobs or anything like that. They just didn't seem to fit with Harsin, his mold for now. And Derek Mason even took less money to go to Oklahoma State, which was really big. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. That was a great point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I meant to. I thought about that pre-show, but I didn't get to talk about it. Them losing Bo. I mean, I'm not a big Bobo fan. I don't think that's huge. Derek Mason was a darn good coordinator for them last year, and I know Auburn fans were, when he left, they're like, "Oh, he wasn't doing his job. Oh, he wasn't that good." I totally disagree with that. I thought that was just kind of, huh?
I said you'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a lot of people kind of covering for Harsin. I mean, that's just not a good look when Derek Mason is a very well thought of defensive coach, and you're promoting a guy. I think Jeff Schmedling, and then the guy, the offensive coordinator is Eric Huso, both first time guys.
Yeah.
And apparently Brian Harsin's going to be calling plays. I mean, when has Brian Harsin shown that he can be an elite play caller? I don't know. It's a little worrisome for me, but continue.
Yeah, no, that was really all I was going to say. I mean, everything off the field, on the field, in the press box, Auburn just didn't have much going for them to be excited about this offseason. And unfortunately, I don't think that translates to the season at all either. You got TJ Finley, which you've kind of be able to see in QB for Auburn with very limited weapons on the outside of Tank Bigsby, outside of Jarquez Hunter at running back. The offensive line's a question mark. Defense lost a lot of elite playmakers on that side of the ball, and you lost, two good SEC coordinators, which does speak a lot to that. Mm-hmm. So, if you're Auburn, maybe there's hope. Maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel that it's all working out the way it's supposed to. But I see cracks in the tunnel, and sometimes when there's cracks, it all caves in. So I think that's kind of the way it's going for Auburn. They've got. I'm not. Neither of us are Auburn fans, but they have too much pride for their offseason to be the way that it was, to have question marks on the field and off the field. Auburn, their team has their fans, the coaches, players should have high standards and should be pushed to be the best. And we just don't know if Harsin's going to be that guy. But you never know. Might just, like I said, there might be a light at the end of the tunnel, but Hampton, I don't think me or you see that coming for him.
I do not, and as I said with Coach Hayes, I don't think any coach deserves to be fired after 2 years, especially if you try to throw an attempted coup on him, and if he hadn't cheated or done anything to really harm the institution.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Brian Harsin is going to get a third year, especially if they don't win at least 8 games. But it's going to be fascinating to watch all season long, the SEC West and kind of how it plays out. We both said Alabama's clear number 1, but I think 2 through 7 is going to be just really interesting to see who emerges, if we're right with our prediction about Arkansas, and if maybe an Auburn, maybe LSU is better than we're anticipating. It can kind of throw a wrench in everything, and that's the beauty of college football. The unexpected happens all the time, and we will be right here covering it all on the Pigskin Cafe. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for our SEC West preview show. It's been a ton of fun getting to talk to Graham and kind of diving into each and every team. If this is your first time listening to the Pigskin Cafe, well, thank you for giving us a listen. And that sounds so goofy, but I'm going to go with it. But we appreciate you checking us out. We hope that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called the Pigskin Cafe. Obviously, shocker. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment, as I mentioned earlier, at the top of the video. Be sure to follow us and subscribe on our podcast feed. We're on Spotify and Apple. Follow us on social media for clips from the show, polls that we have going on, and a lot of exciting information that we have going on there. We will be back next week, hopefully breaking down the SEC East. Maybe get a little NFL talk in there. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to kind of gauge the interest on that and see where we're at where we're at. And we've got a little bit of breaking news, Graham. Keon Keeley from Notre Dame has decommitted.
That's big.
And it is huge. And he, in a matter of minutes after decommitting, he has received 3 crystal balls to the Alabama Crimson Tide. So I'm very excited about that. I had to share that.
If that close out the show the best way, do hell.
Exactly. With recruiting
Big old Roll Tide.
Big old Roll Tide, baby. You know it. Keon, come home. We'd love to have you. And with that, we'll close on the high note. The Pigskin Cafe is closed for now, but until next time, chew on that.